I'd like to thank you for leaving crazy person out of the description. So I thought, I was trying to think, what is the most useful thing that I could, what could I say that could actually be helpful or useful to you in the future? And I thought I'd perhaps tell the story of how I sort of came to be here. How did some of these things happen? And maybe there's some lessons there. Because I often find myself wondering, how did this happen? So when I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, the things that we take for granted today would be you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly, that's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, having effectively with the internet a group mind of sorts, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. And I always had sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. So I studied physics and business, because I figured in order to do a lot of these things, you need to know how the universe works, and you need to know how the economy works. And you also need to be able to bring a lot of people together to work with you to create something, because it's very difficult to do something as an individual if it's a significant technology. So I originally came out to California to try to figure out how to improve the energy density of electric vehicles, basically to try to figure out if there was an advanced capacitor that could serve as an alternative to batteries. And that was in '95, and that's also when the internet started to happen. And I thought, well, I can either pursue this technology where success may not be one of the possible outcomes, which is always tricky, or participate in the internet and be part of it. So I decided to drop out. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we're past graduation, so I can't be accused of recommending that to you. So did some internet stuff. Did a few things here and there. One of which was PayPal. And I think maybe it's helpful to say one of the things that was important then in the creation of PayPal was kind of how it started, because initially the initial thought was with PayPal was to create an agglomeration of financial services, so to have one place where all your financial services needs would be seamlessly integrated and work smoothly. And then we had like a little feature which was to do email payments. And whenever we'd show the system off to someone, we'd show the hard part, which was the agglomeration of financial services, which was quite difficult to put together. Nobody was interested. Then we'd show people email payments, which was actually quite easy, and everybody was interested. So this is, I think it's important to take feedback from your environment. You want to be as closed loop as possible. So we focused on email payments and really try to make that work, and that's what really got things to take off. But but if we hadn't responded to what people said, then we probably would not have been successful. So it's important to look for things like that and focus on them when you see them, and correct your prior assumptions. And then let's get some work. Going from PayPal, I thought, well, what are some of the other problems that are likely to most affect the future of humanity? It really wasn't from the perspective of what's the rank-ordered best way to make money, which is okay, but it was really what I think is going to most affect the future of humanity. So I think the biggest terrestrial problem we've got is sustainable energy, but the production and consumption of energy in a sustainable manner. If we don't solve that this century, we're in deep trouble. And then the other one being the extension of life beyond Earth to make life multiplanetary. So that's the basis for the latter is the basis for SpaceX, and the former is the basis for Tesla and Solar City. And when I started SpaceX, initially I thought that, well, there's no way one could possibly start a rocket company. I wasn't that crazy. But then I thought, well, what is a way to increase NASA's budget? That was actually my initial goal. So I thought, well, if we can do a low-cost mission to Mars, something called Mars Oasis, which would land seeds with seeds and dehydrated nutrient gel, and you hydrate them upon landing, and then you'd have this great sort of money shot of green plants on a red background, and the public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives, and this would be the first life on Mars, the furthest that life's ever traveled, as far as we know. And I thought, well, that would get people really excited, and therefore increase NASA's budget. So obviously, the financial outcome from such a mission would probably be zero. So anything better than that was on the upside. So I actually went to Russia 3 times to look at buying a refurbished ICBM. Because that was the best deal. And I can tell you it was very weird going there in late 2001, 2002, going to the Russian rocket forces and saying, I'd like to buy 2 of your biggest rockets, but you can keep the nuke. That's a lot more. And that was 10 years ago, I guess, so they thought I was crazy, but I did have money, so that was okay. And after making several trips to Russia, I came to the conclusion that actually my initial impression was wrong about because my initial thought was, well, that there's not enough will to explore and expand beyond Earth and have a Mars base and that kind of thing. But I came to the conclusion that was wrong. In fact, there's plenty of will, particularly in the United States, because the United States is a nation of explorers, of people who came here from other parts of the world. I think the United States is really a distillation of the spirit of human exploration. So, but if people think it's impossible, then, or it's going to completely break the federal budget, then they're not going to do it. So after my 3rd trip, I said, okay, well, what we really need to do here is try to solve the space transport problem, and started SpaceX. This was against the advice of pretty much everyone I talked to. One friend made me sit down and watch a bunch of videos of rockets blowing up. Let me tell you, he wasn't far wrong. It was tough going there in the beginning because I'd never built anything physical. I mean, I'd built like little model rockets as a kid and that kind of thing, but I'd never had a company that built anything physical. So I had to kind of figure out how to do all these things and bring together the right team of people, and so we did all that and then failed 3 times. It was tough going. Because the thing about a rocket is that the passing grade is 100%. You don't get to actually test the rocket in the real environment that it's going to be in. So I think the best analogy for rocket engineering is It's like if you want to create a really complicated bit of software, you can't run the software as an integrated whole, and you can't run it on the computer it's intended to run on. But the first time you put it all together and run it on that computer, it must run with no bugs. That's basically the essence of it. So we missed the mark there. The first launch, I was picking up bits of rocket near the launch site. It was a bit sad. But we learned with each successive flight, and were able to, eventually with the fourth flight in 2008, reach orbit. And that was also with the last bit of money that we had. So thank goodness that happened. I think the saying is fourth time's the charm. So we got the Falcon 1 to orbit, and then began to scale that up to the Falcon 9, which is about an order of magnitude more thrust. It's around 1 million pounds of thrust, and we managed to get that to orbit, and then developed a Dragon spacecraft, which recently was able to dock and return to Earth from the space station. That was thanks. That was a white-knuckled event. Yeah, it's a huge relief. Still can't quite believe it actually happened. But there's a lot more that must happen beyond this in order for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization, and ultimately a multi-planet species. And that's something I think it's vitally important, and I hope that some of you will participate in that, either at SpaceX or at other companies, because it's just really one of the most important things for the preservation and extension of consciousness. I mean, it's worth noting, as I'm sure people are aware, that the Earth has been around for 4 billion years, and civilization, at least in terms of having writing, has been around for 10,000 years, and that's being generous. It's really somewhat of a tenuous existence that civilization and consciousness, as we know it, has been on Earth. And I think I'm actually fairly optimistic about the future of Earth. So I don't want to sort of people to have the wrong impression that I think we're all about to die. I think things will most likely be okay for a long time on Earth, but not for sure, but most likely. But even if it's sort of 99% likely, a 1% chance is still worth spending a fair bit of effort to ensure that we've backed up the biosphere, planetary redundancy, if you will. And so I think it's really quite important. And in order to do that, there's a breakthrough that needs to occur, which is to create a rapidly and completely reusable transport system to Mars, which is one of those things that's right on the borderline of impossible. But that's sort of the thing that we're going to try to achieve there with SpaceX. And then on the Tesla front, the goal with Tesla was really to try to show that what electric cars can do, because people had the wrong impression. We had to change people's perception of an electric vehicle, because they used to think of it as something that was slow and ugly and had low range, kind of like a golf cart. So that's why we created the Tesla Roadster, to show that you can be fast, attractive, and long range. And it's amazing how, even though you can show that something works on paper, and the calculations are very clear, until you actually have the physical object and they can drive it, it doesn't really sink in for people. And so that I think is something worth noting. If you're going to create a company, the first thing you should try to do is create a working prototype. Everything looks great on PowerPoint. you can make anything work on PowerPoint. But if you have an actual demonstration article, even if it's in primitive form, that's much more effective for convincing people. So we made the Tesla Roadster, and now we're coming out soon with the Model S, which is a four-door sedan. Because after we made the Tesla Roadster, people said, "Oh, sure. We always knew you could make a car like that. It's an expensive car, and it's low volume, and it's small, and all that. But you couldn't make a real car." Like, okay, fine. We got to make that too. So that's coming out soon. Yeah, so that's the, I think where things are, and hopefully that there are some lessons to be drawn there. But I think the overarching point I want to make is that you guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit, and go out there and create some magic. Thank you. All right. I'd like to thank you for leaving crazy person out of the description. So I thought, I was trying to think, what is the most useful thing that I could, what could I say that could actually be helpful or useful to you in the future? And I thought I'd perhaps tell the story of how I sort of came to be here. How did some of these things happen? And maybe there's some lessons there, because I often find myself wondering, how did this happen? So when I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, the things that we take for granted today would be you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly, that's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, having effectively with the internet a group mind of sorts, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. And I also had sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. So I studied physics and business, because I figured in order to do a lot of these things, you need to know how the universe works, and you need to know how the economy works. And you also need to be able to bring a lot of people together to work with you to create something, because it's very difficult to do something as an individual if it's a significant technology. So I originally came out to California to try to figure out how to improve the energy density of electric vehicles, basically to try to figure out if there was an advanced capacitor that could serve as an alternative to batteries. And that was in '95, and that's also when the internet started to happen. And I thought, well, I can either pursue this technology where success may not be one of the possible outcomes, which is always tricky, or participate in the internet and be part of it. So I decided to drop out. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we're past graduation, so I can't be accused of recommending that to you. So did some internet stuff. Did a few things here and there. One of which was PayPal. And I think maybe it's helpful to say one of the things that was important there in the creation of PayPal was kind of how it started, because initially the initial thought was with PayPal was to create an agglomeration of financial services, so to have one place where all of your financial services needs would be seamlessly integrated, and work smoothly. And then we had like a little feature which was to do email payments. And whenever we'd show the system off to someone, we'd show the hard part, which was the agglomeration of financial services, which was quite difficult to.
What a challenge to talk to one of the most, in my opinion, in life, we've seen within this part of the world great people like Al-Khwarizmi, who invented algorithm. Globally, Newton, Henry Ford, the Wright brother, Albert Einstein, and Elon Musk. It seems you are in rush. You want to go to places that nobody been. You are reinventing a certain industry, from the rocket industry with SpaceX to the car industry with Tesla. What's your mission life? Why you do whatever you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and we're having a really great time with my kids in Dubai. It's really been fantastic. I'd really encourage anyone who hasn't been to visit. What a great city.
Thank you. Thank you.
And in terms of the motivations, I guess the sort of kind of a long version of the explanation, but essentially, when I was a kid, I was wondering kind of what's the meaning of life, like why are we here, what's it all about, and I came to the conclusion that what really matters is trying to understand the right questions to ask. And the more that we can increase the scope and scale of human consciousness, the better we are able to ask these questions. And so I think that there's certain things that are necessary to ensure that the future is good. And some of those things are, in the long term, having long-term sustainable transport and sustainable energy generation, and to be a spacefaring civilization, and for humanity to be out there among the stars and be a multi-planetary species. I mean, I think being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity. And that's one reason, kind of like life insurance for life collectively, life as we know it. But then the part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider two futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system, I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. You know, life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living.
So what is life for you? I mean, you look at our life, and I heard you before speaking. Is it a dream? Is it
Is life
real?
a dream?
Is it a million D? What is life for Elon Musk?
I find as I get older, I find that question to be maybe more and more confusing or troubling or uncertain. I think particularly when you see the advancement of something like video games. You know, like say 40 years ago, you had video games. The most advanced video game would be like Pong, where you had like two rectangles and a dot. You're like batting it back and forth.
I played it.
Oh yeah, like me too, exactly. I played
all.
Pong. Exactly, it sort of dates you a little bit. But yeah, we both played the same game. And that was like, wow, that was a pretty fun game at the time. But now you can see a video game that's photorealistic, almost photorealistic, and millions of people playing simultaneously. And you see where things are going with virtual reality and augmented reality. And if you extrapolate that out into the future with any rate of progress at all, like even 0.1% or something like that a year, then eventually those games will be indistinguishable from reality. They'll be so realistic, you will not be able to tell the difference between that game and the reality as we know it. And then it seems like, well, how do we know that that didn't happen in the past and that we're not in one of those games ourselves?
Interesting. Interesting.
I mean, could be.
Everything is possible in life.
I mean, particularly like things seem to be accelerating to something.
Isn't it? I mean, if we look at our life, it seems in the past 100 years, life been accelerating quite fast.
Yeah.
In the past 20,
It's
much
getting
faster.
Faster and faster.
Is it more slow? So my question is really, how life will be in Earth 20, 30, 50 years from now? Our education, our transport. How do you see it?
Well, I think this is one of those things that's quite difficult to predict. When you think of, say, the first controlled powered flight was 1903 with the Wright brothers. And then 66 years later, we put the first people on the moon. I mean, that, if you'd ask people, say in 1900, what are the odds of, man landing on the moon, they would have said that's ridiculous. And if you try to talk to them about the internet, they would not even know what the heck what are you even talking about? Like, this sounds so crazy. But today, with a $100 device, you can video conference with anyone in the world, on the other side of the world. And if you have a Wi-Fi connection, it's basically free. Free to have an instant visual communication with anyone, or even with millions of people. With social media, you can communicate to millions of people simultaneously. And you can Google something and ask any question. It's like an oracle of wisdom that you can ask almost any question and get an instant response. It would have been incredibly difficult to predict these things in the past, even the relatively recent past. So I think the one thing that we can be quite certain of is that any predictions we make today for what the future will be like in 50 years will be wrong. That's for sure. I mean, I think directionally, I can tell you what I hope the future has, as opposed to maybe what it will be, because this may just be wishful thinking. I hope we are out there on Mars and maybe beyond Mars, the moons of Jupiter. I hope we're traveling frequently throughout the solar system, perhaps preparing for missions to nearby star systems. I think all of this is possible within 50 years. And I think that would be very exciting to do that. And I think we'll see autonomy and artificial intelligence advance tremendously. I think that's actually quite near term. My guess is in probably 10 years, it will be very unusual for cars to be built that are not fully autonomous. 10 years.
10 years from now.
Yeah. I think almost all cars built will be capable of full autonomy in about 10 years. As it is, the Tesla cars that are made today have the sensor system necessary for full autonomy, and we think probably enough compute power to be safer than a person. So it's mostly just a question of developing the software and uploading the software. And if it turns out that that more compute power is needed, we can easily upgrade the computer. And so that's all Tesla's built since October of last year. And other manufacturers will follow and do the same thing. So getting in a car will be like getting in an elevator. You just tell it where you want to go, and it takes you there with extreme levels of safety, and that'll be normal. It'll just be normal. Like for elevators, there used to be elevator operators. You get in, there'd be a guy moving a lever. Now you just get in, you press the button, and that's taken for granted. So autonomy will be widespread. I think one of the most troubling questions is artificial intelligence, and I don't mean narrow AI. Like vehicle autonomy, I would put in the narrow AI class. It's narrowly trying to achieve a certain function. But deep artificial intelligence, or what is sometimes called artificial general intelligence, where you could have AI that is much smarter than the smartest human on Earth. This, I think, is a dangerous situation.
Why it is dangerous? I mean, there is two views. One view is artificial intelligence will help humanity. There is another school of thought is artificial intelligence is a threat to humanity. Why is it?
Well, I think it's both. It's like one way to think of it is imagine we were going to be visited. Imagine you're very confident that we were going to be visited by super intelligent aliens in, let's say, 10 years or 20 years at the most. Super intelligent.
So you think within 20 years
we'll
have alien in Earth?
Well, digital super intelligence will be like an alien.
It will be like an alien.
Yeah.
But my question is, do you think there is other intelligent life outside the Earth?
It seems probable, but I think this is one of the great questions in physics and philosophy, is where are the aliens? Maybe they're among us, I don't know. Some people think I'm an alien. Not true. Not true.
But maybe we are alien.
Of course I'd say that,
maybe
wouldn't
we
I?
are alien, Ellen. I mean, if you look at this part of the world,
Yeah.
they believe that human beings are not from Earth. They came from somewhere else. Eve
Maybe.
and Adam came from somewhere else to Earth. So in a way, human being alien to this land. Do you think we'll make contact with alien within the next 50 years?
Well, that's a really tough one to say. I mean, if there are super intelligent aliens out there, they're probably already observing us. That would seem quite likely, and we just are not smart enough to realize it. But I can do some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and any advanced alien civilization that was at all interested in populating the galaxy, even without exceeding the speed of light, even if you're only moving at, say, 10 or 20% of the speed of light, you could populate the entire galaxy in, let's say, 10 million years. Maybe 20 million years max. This is nothing, in the grand scheme of things.
Once you said you want to die on Mars, why?
I don't, to be clear, I don't want to die on Mars. It's like, we're all going to die someday. And if you're going to pick some place to die, then why not Mars?
Okay.
If we're born on Earth, why not die on Mars? Seems like maybe it'd be kind of exciting. But so I think, given the choice of dying on Earth or dying on Mars, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll die on Mars. But it's not some kind of Mars death wish. And if I do die on Mars, I just don't want it to be on impact.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Let's come back to Earth, actually.
Okay.
You tweeted that you are building a tunnel under Washington, D.C. Why? What is it?
Well, it's a secret plot,
Okay.
just between us.
Nobody heard you?
Yeah, exactly. Please keep that secret. Well, I think this is going to sound a little. I mean, it seems like somewhat trivial or silly, but I've been saying this for many years now. But I think that the solution to urban congestion is a network of tunnels under cities. And you can, when I say, I don't mean a 2D plane of tunnels. I mean tunnels that go many levels deep. So you can always go deeper than you can go up. Like the deepest mines are taller than the tallest buildings. So you could have tunnels, a network of tunnels that is 20, 30, 40, 50 levels, as many levels as you want, really. And so given that, you can overcome the congestion situation in any city in the world. The challenge is just figuring out how do you build tunnels quickly and at low cost and with high safety. So if tunneling technology can be improved to the point where you can build tunnels fast, cheap, and safe, then that would completely get rid of any traffic situations in cities. And so I think that's why I think it's an important technology. And Washington, D.C., LA, and most of the major American cities, most major cities in the world, suffer from severe traffic issues. And it's mostly because you've got these buildings you have tall buildings that are 3D, and you have a road network that is one level. And then people generally want to go in and out of those buildings at the exact same time. So then you get the traffic jam.
Let's come back to UAE and Dubai. The first time I met you, it was 4th of June 2015 at your office in SpaceX. And I asked you, would you have a presence in UAE? And your answer was, I'm busy with China. Maybe not in the near future.
Yeah.
And almost a year and a half later, we are here. Seems time goes quite fast.
Yeah.
Why now?
Well, I think actually things are going reasonably well in China. We had some initial challenges figuring out charging and service infrastructure and various other things, but now it's actually going fairly well, and so the timing seemed to be good to really make a significant debut in this region, starting in Dubai.
In your opinion, what is the new disturbing thing that will come in technology next? What's next in technology?
What's next in technology?
That will disturb the way we live, the way we think, the way we do business.
Well, the most near-term impact from a technological standpoint is autonomous cars, like fully self-driving cars. Like I said, that's going to happen much faster than people realize. It's going to be a great convenience to be an autonomous car, but there are many people whose jobs it is to drive. So in fact, I think it might be the single largest employer of people is driving in various forms. And so then we need to figure out new roles for what do those people do. But it will be very disruptive and very quick. Now, I should characterize what I mean by quick, because there are quick means different things to different people. There are over 2 billion vehicles in the world, approaching 2.5 billion cars and trucks in the world. The total new vehicle production capacity is about 100 million. Which makes sense because the life of a car or truck before it's finally scrapped is about 20-25 years. So, so the point at which we see full autonomy appear will not be the point at which there is massive societal upheaval, because it will take a long time to make enough autonomous vehicles to disrupt employment. So that disruption I'm talking about will take place over about 20 years. But still, 20 years is a short period of time to have, I think, something like 12 to 15% of the workforce be unemployed.
Yeah, thank you. This is the largest global government summit. We have over 139 government here. If you want to advise government official to be ready for the future, what is three things or three advice you'll give them?
Well, I think the first bit of advice would be to really pay close attention to the development of artificial intelligence. I think we need to just be very careful in how we adopt artificial intelligence and to make sure that researchers don't get carried away. Because sometimes what happens is a scientist can get so engrossed in their work, they don't necessarily realize the ramifications of what they're doing. So I think it's important for public safety that governments keep a close eye on artificial intelligence and make sure that it does not represent a danger to the public. Let's see. Secondly, I would say we do need to think about transport in general, and there's the movement towards electric vehicles, sustainable transport. I think that's going to be good for many reasons, but again, not something that happens immediately. That'll happen slower than the self-driving vehicles. So that's probably something that happens over 30 or 40 years, the transition to electric vehicles. So thinking about that in context, the demand for electricity will increase dramatically. So currently, in terms of total energy usage in the world, it's about 1/3 electricity, about 1/3 transport, about 1/3 heating. So over time, that will transition to almost all, not all, but predominantly electricity, which means that the demand for electricity will probably triple. So it's going to be very important to think about how do you make so much more electricity.
Seem they have an easy job. That's it. There is no more challenges for them.
No, well, then I think maybe these things do play into each other a little bit. But what to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better.
Okay.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. And if my assessment is correct and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. Now, the output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with. And then how do we ensure that the future is going to be the future that we want, that we still like? No, I mean, I do think that there's a potential path here which is, and we're really getting into science fiction or sort of advanced science stuff, but having some sort of merger with biological intelligence and machine intelligence. To some degree, we are already a cyborg. You think of like the digital tools that you have, your phone, your computer, the applications that you have, like the fact that, as I was mentioning earlier, you can ask a question and instantly get an answer from Google or from other things. And so you already have a digital tertiary layer. I say tertiary because you can think of the limbic system, kind of the animal brain or the primal brain, and then the cortex, kind of the thinking, planning part of the brain, and then your digital self as a third layer. So you already have that, and it's like if somebody dies, their digital ghost is still around. All of their emails and the pictures that they posted and their social media, that still lives, even if if they died. So over time, I think we'll probably see a closer merger of biological intelligence and digital intelligence. And it's mostly about the bandwidth, the speed of the connection between your brain and your the digital extension of yourself. Particularly output. And output, if anything, is getting worse. We used to have like keyboards that we'd use a lot. Now we do most of our input through our thumbs on a phone. And that's just very slow. A computer can communicate at 1 trillion bits per second, but your thumb can maybe do, 10 bits per second or 100 if you're being generous. So some high bandwidth interface to the brain, I think, will be something that helps achieve a symbiosis between human and machine intelligence, and maybe solves the control problem and the usefulness problem. Getting pretty esoteric here. I don't know if this is...
It's close.
Okay.
We got it. Always you think out of the box. Your idea is so huge. You want to go to space. You decided to go to space. You did it. You decided that you want to land your rocket back. You failed 7 times, 8 times.
Yeah, something like that.
Then it landed.
More times than I care to count.
Yeah. How do you come with this idea, actually? Sometimes they're pushing the human limit. You are always pushing the human limit. Why?
Well, I think about what technology solution is necessary in order to achieve the particular goal, and then try to make as much progress in that direction as possible. So in the case of spaceflight, the critical breakthrough that's necessary in spaceflight is rapid and complete reusability of rockets, just as we have for aircraft. You can imagine that if an aircraft was single use, almost no one would fly. Because you can buy, like say, a 747 might be $250 million, $300 million, or something like that. You'd need 2 of them for a round trip. But nobody's going to pay millions of dollars per ticket to fly to do air travel. But because you can reuse the aircraft tens of thousands of times, the air travel becomes much more affordable. And the same is true of rockets. So our rocket costs $60 million roughly. So the capital cost, if it can be used once, is $60 million. But if the capital cost, if it can be used 1,000 times, is $60,000. So then if you can carry a lot of people per flight, then you can get the cost of spaceflight to be something not far from the cost of air flight. So it's extremely fundamental. Because Earth's gravity well is quite deep, Earth has a relatively, fairly high gravity, the difficulty of making a rocket reusable is much greater than the difficulty of making an aircraft reusable. And that's why a fully reusable rocket has never been developed thus far. But if you use the most advanced materials, most advanced design techniques, and you get everything just right, then I'm confident that you can do a fully reusable rocket. Fortunately, if Earth's gravity was even 10% stronger, I would say it would be impossible.
You need a team around you to deliver a lot of ideas. How do you choose your team? Based on what?
Well, I suppose honestly that it tends to be gut feel more than anything else. So when I interview somebody, my interview question is always the same. It's
What do you ask?
I said, tell me the story of your life and the decisions that you made along the way and why you made them. And then, and also tell me about some of the most difficult problems you worked on and how you solved them. And that question I think is very important because the people that really solved the problem, they know exactly how they solved it. They know the little details. And the people that pretended to solve the problem, they can maybe go one level and then they get stuck.
So, what was your biggest challenge in life?
Biggest challenge in life?
No challenge.
Well, no, there's a lot of them. I'm trying to decide which is which is the worst. I think just thinking about how to spend time. One of the biggest challenges I think is making sure you have a corrective feedback loop, and then maintaining that corrective feedback loop over time, even when people want to tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Okay.
That's very difficult.
Yes. Time is over. I'll ask you just one last question,
Sure.
if you allow me. In the World Government Summit, we have so many people so many young people actually, from across the globe. If you have an advice to them, young people globally who want to be like Elon Musk, what's your advice to them?
I think that probably they shouldn't want to be.
You?
I think it sounds better than it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as much fun being me as you'd think. I don't know.
You don't think so?
No. There's definitely, it could be worse for sure, but it's, I'm not sure I'm not sure I want to be me.
Okay.
But if, I think advice, I mean, if you want to make progress in things, I think that the best analytical framework for understanding the future is physics. I'd recommend studying the thinking process around physics, like not the equations. I mean, the equations certainly they're helpful, but the way of thinking in physics is it's the best framework for understanding things that are counterintuitive. And always taking the position that you're to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong over time. I think one of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. Like you want something to be true, even if it isn't true, and so you ignore the things that you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid, and like I said, it's certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong, and solicit critical feedback, particularly from friends. Like friends, particularly friends, if somebody loves you, they want the best for you. They don't want to tell you the bad things. So you have to ask them, and say, really, I really do want to know. and then they'll tell you.
Thank you very much. It's been it is great for the World Government Summit to have a legend who's creating the future for humanity, to share his thought, his idea, his vision, his challenges, and his hope for life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.